Hi, everybody. So in this video, I wanted to talk about a question that I've gotten quite a bit of, and I think it's because of a previous video that I made initially when I started this channel about pursuing my MFA in illustration. And I got the question about, what were programs that were available? Is it worth going to get my MFA, my master's degree? Do you have any suggestions on should I pick this degree or another? So I kind of wanted to cover this in this video. This is all predicated on my personal experience, and so this will vary from person to person. I always say, do your own research. This is just my perspective on it, and yours could be totally different depending on your situation. So one of the main things that made me want to get my MFA is, number one, the money. I was like, I'm an art teacher, and so I am certified by my state. So in the state that I teach in, you can get a certificate bump into a different level, and that level allows you to get paid more. So I was looking at a pretty sizable pay increase per year, and it also would funnel into my teacher's retirement. Now, this can vary per state. Like, I know that in my state, it has gotten a lot more restrictive about where you can get your master's degree from, and they actually have a list of endorsed programs, and I got lucky because of what I taught. It was relevant to the degree that I got, and I had to get special approval for that. So you really want to check your state. Okay, so that's one of the possible pros of getting an MFA, and that will also depend on what degree you get. Like I said, I had to get special approval for illustration. Some states, it might be different. They might be like, you can just get your master's degree in whatever, and it's fine. I just know from my experience, I would say maybe it was over 5 years ago, and the state that I am in, they got more strict about what they were willing to approve. So you do need to check with your state and their board of education, and they have some kind of professional practices, and they'll have a website, and you can look up that information or talk to if you already are a teacher, then I would definitely talk to your HR and make sure that that gets approved before you spend the money and all the time for that. Okay, so number two, a career option that I also wanted to consider at the time was being able to teach higher education. So we're talking about colleges, universities. Currently, it seems like they really want you to have a MFA, but there are always exceptions to the rule. Now, I have heard from people, because of their professional experience, like they had a lot of awards, they had a lot of accolades in what they were teaching in higher education. So they kind of waived it and said, oh, well, that award or that experience, that makes it like you already went to graduate school, so we don't really need you to have a master's degree. But most of the times they do want you to have a MFA. And so like here in the US, that's like the terminal highest degree right now in 2023. Now that could change in the future. So, and I know in like overseas, they do have like doctorates in illustration, but here in the US, usually it's a Master of Fine Arts degree. So like when you apply online for these universities or colleges, they kind of ask that question, do you have an MFA by XYZ? And it probably helps them weed out a lot of applications that don't have that. So anyway, so yes, being able to teach at higher ed levels. So that's another pro. Pro number three for me personally was the ability of spending that focused amount of time to improve my craft. So like I spent a lot of time, which I don't regret, being an art teacher. I enjoy it. I still teach art. And it's like one of my favorite things to do. It's like my fun vacation time when I go and hang out with my students and teach. So with that said, it's hard that I've found, and once again, it's different for each person, but I found it was difficult to juggle full-time teaching commitments, also being a parent and having a family. I thought it was very difficult to make time for my art. And so getting that MFA degree really allowed me to say, hey, I'm going to focus on this. I want to do X, Y, Z. And I wanted to be a children's book illustrator, author. I also wanted to get into art licensing. So it was kind of saying at this point, I'm going to focus and I'm going to make this my priority. I'm also the type of person who does better with some kind of regular structure. So once I started graduate school, it kind of propels you into this constant work, do assignment, work, have another assignment. So that structure was good for me. So it was more of per se that I wanted to have that focus period of time that I could develop my craft and get it to the level where I could be professional enough and get hired as a freelance illustrator. Okay. So those are the pros. Okay. So now what are the possible cons? One more pro. I forgot. Pro number 4, and I forgot this one, and I cannot leave this out. I made some good friends. So it's very isolating being a freelance illustrator. I know from my personality, I really love the fact that I get to be a part-time art teacher. So that gives me socialization out of my studio. But with that said, I like having other illustrators who are also doing the same thing. Not necessarily being a children's book illustrator, but working in the field of illustration. So people that I met in my MFA program, I still chat with them. We might not be in class together virtually or in person, but I still can reach out to them with any just to kind of talk shop, just kind of say, hey, how you doing? How's this project going? And then also, helping each other out when anything comes up. So I think that is another pro for going to graduate school. Some of those people will help you, keep you motivated to keep going because they're just focused on doing the same thing that you want to do. And we're working in that industry. And in some cases, I feel like if they're working, especially in-house somewhere, they can actually open doors and help because, we all want to work with our friends and we know that they're reliable. We know that we're going to have a good time. They're going to help you get hired on. So the networking can be very helpful in that respect. Okay, so let's go over some of the cons here. And I wrote them down on my slip of paper here. So if I look down, okay, so one is definitely the money. I mean, the financial cost of going to graduate school, especially if you go to a private art school, it's extremely expensive. I would say, yes, they have scholarships and things like that, but it is a financial commitment. I literally saved. I saved and I saved and I saved. So this huge gap that I had of time, I worked a lot and I saved my money. And so I got scholarships, and they do have scholarships that you most likely will be eligible for. But the thing is, it's still a lot of money, even with the scholarships, so I don't know. It depends on your budget. It depends on what you want to do after you finish graduate school. Make sure that you're not straddled with a lot of financial debt. I think you really have to weigh in budget and see how much, instead of waiting, they'll have you do all of the the FAFSA stuff, and then you wait till the end and you finish, and then they're doing the counseling thing, and then they're like, oh, well, this is how much. Do that before you go to graduate school, and realistically, if you're going to work in-house somewhere, how much is that job going to pay you? And if you do not need a master's degree in order to do that, and there are alternate programs online, you might want to look at those and see if there's some online schools that maybe offer a certificate, or they're just going to provide you with the skill sets, and you're a disciplined person. You're able to say, I really want XYZ and I want to work in-house, someplace. Then, to be honest, I've never had anybody ask me as a freelance illustrator, did you have a degree in this? They just look at your portfolio. And so I think it's predicated on, the money versus what you want to do at the end, if it's worthwhile. So check for those payoffs. So yeah, because it's a lot of money. Yeah, it's like, I think tuition at the time that I was attending was $37,000 a year, and I definitely got a big chunk of scholarship. So it cut because I was an art teacher, so that cut like half of it off. But it's still a lot of money after, I think it was 3 years. Yeah, I think it was like 3 years. And I also worked 1 year full time, and I was just extremely exhausted. So, if you can, if you want to make it so that you can, not have to deal with as much financial stress, if you can also go and work full time. Because some of the programs, a lot of them, instead of being in person per se, they're geared towards, like the program I went to was a virtual, started out virtually, so it was just e-learning. And so and there are other programs like that now. I think that's much more common for a master's degree to be able to go virtually for illustration. So it's just going to depend on what your degree option is, because I know like some master's programs, like say like something like fibers, it's very difficult here in the United States actually to find any full online master's degree fibers programs. So yeah, it's really going to be predicated on what you're trying to do. And so that time is, it's a lot of time and money. So, and at the end of the day, like I said, it's not like getting a master's degree is going to guarantee you necessarily what you want. I think it's always predicated on what you put into it, as far as what your body of work ends up being as you come out of it. Does it fit that market? Is it like, because definitely if you're like in the top 5% of students, I've seen them just hit the ground running and they are just like working like gangbusters. So if you're one of those people and you really hone your portfolio to the market that you want to work in, then it'll be definitely worthwhile. But I think I've also seen people who did not get their MFA. They're like did an undergrad degree in something else like engineering, and then they just did online schooling through for illustration, and it wasn't a degree program. They ended up with great portfolios, hit the ground running, working. So yeah, I wouldn't base getting your MFA on something that is necessarily going to be like, oh, that's going to get me that job I want, per se, or really make me successful as a freelance illustrator. Because, nobody asks you, as far as with freelance illustration, never had anybody ask me, do you have a degree in this? So just be aware of that. So with the next thing is time. It is a big chunk of time. I'd say that can be a plus, and it can also be a con. Because you are working on illustration, it's like, I'm older. It was like physically hard. Like I had like problems with my posture afterwards because I was just drawing constantly and working on these projects, and it's kind of a hefty load, and just being older, it was just physically exhausting and tiring. I also, that first year, I had a full-time job as an art teacher, and it could be really stressful. So I was like getting up sometimes at 4 a.m. in the morning to make comments in my virtual classes, or working late in the night just to get assignments done. And it can be a lot to manage. So so make sure that's depending on what season of your life you're in, make sure it really fits for you, like emotionally, mentally. Like, are you prepared to take on all of this and say, okay, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do so much so that you're willing to commit that time to it, because that's the one thing. We all get a certain amount of hours in the day, and there's no more of that. That is it. And so I go, yeah, you can't get that time back. I don't regret it by any means, but I do wish I had taken more. So I guess this is kind of another like con of it, like really taking care of my health. Like there were certain things that I didn't really think about, like my posture, taking breaks. Like no one's gonna give you an award for sitting at your desk and grinding it out for 10 hours or whatever like that. That is not gonna end up helping you out physically. Like take breaks, like get away from your computer, or however you work, painting, traditionally, or whatever you do, because get a pinched nerve. Oh my gosh, that was awful. And have to do physical therapy and stuff like that. I've also had friends who've talked about they drew so much that they had to have surgery on their hands. They ended up having to wear braces and things like that because they were drawing so much. So yeah, just physically and sometimes mentally, just having to get all of those things done, it can be a lot. And so what I recommend is wherever you decide to go, talk to somebody who is currently in that program. So if you find that you're like, oh, I want to go to XYZ school, a lot of the graduate students, like, they're pretty friendly. I was friendly. I would answer questions that people would have, and I would just be like, oh, okay, this is my experience with this program. So if it's virtual, talk to other students who may, because a lot of people put it on their profiles and stuff and say on Instagram, I'm a student at XYZ school, and you can reach out to them, and they're fairly friendly, and they'll answer questions about that. Yeah, so that can be very helpful because, I'll be honest, because these schools, they are, I kind of realistically look at it and I go like, like any school, you're gonna only hear like, well, XYZ is always so great. This is the greatest. And every school says that. I mean, that's just, a selling point. So I would talk to somebody who is a current student in the program field that you want to be in. And you may want to talk to more than one student, and just to make sure that that's a good fit for you at that moment in time where you are at in your life. So yeah, I think, that's really important to make sure that you get what you want out of the investment that you're making in your education. You really have to advocate for yourself. Don't always think, oh, I'm getting this information, or, I was always that person who asked a lot of questions. And I think a lot of it was because I was just older, and also coming from an education background, I'd be like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so I would talk to other people. So it's really helpful to find out from people who've, currently in the program that you want to study. Yeah, they'll give you lots of tips and advice about that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, probably one of the drawbacks I felt like with getting an MFA, because I feel like a lot of time was focused on, and this is one of those things that you just, in hindsight, you look back and you go like, a lot of time spent on craft and getting things to a place where you're at a professional level. And that's going to vary from person to person. It's hard. And it's like, there's always pros and cons, because hypothetically, you try in your classes, like, to learn professional practices, like, any illustration program, they'll have like some business related to illustration. And I found that it's all hypothetical. It's like we are all very different from each other. We are all interested in different markets. So this is can be a bit of a con, because you're doing things that will probably help you out once you finish in a way, but I feel like it was all in theory because they're not really going to tell you like, go do this now. It's like you just, you really have to make that understanding for yourself when you look at your body of work, like especially because you don't take those classes generally until the end of your program, like as you're working on your, body of work, your portfolio that you would actually send out for whatever jobs and things like that, like you have to have those moments of clarity where you are really honestly looking at your work in terms of, like, for me, children's books. So, like, probably one of the biggest things that helped me out wasn't so much in graduate school as I found a mentor outside of graduate school. But then I have to say, it was because of graduate school, I was required to do an internship, and I knew I wanted to focus on children's books. I said, this is where I want to be. This is what I'm passionate about. I want to create books for future readers who can see themselves, like, see like kids who look like me, because that just wasn't occurring in my childhood, even difficult for my son when I was buying children's books for him. So I knew probably my best bet, and I actually heard this from SVS Learn, their podcast. They said, go get a mentor. And so I ended up getting a mentor through my graduate internship, and I had to find that person. It wasn't like they were pairing me up. So I found that person, and invaluable. I mean, like, for a freelance illustrator to have somebody who's doing what you want to do at this point, it was extremely helpful. It was much more helpful because in the sense of then taking those, hypothetical kind of business classes, because that person was really doing it now. And they could tell me, like, your stuff is not quite hitting the market. Now, like I said, you don't have to go to graduate school in order to get a mentor. You can find mentors in the most unlikely places. You could join an organization, you go to their workshop, and then you're like, oh, I really like that person, what they were saying. Do they need like a part-time assistant? Would they do something in trade for my time, for their expertise and knowledge? Because like many, like thousands of years ago, like, you would have, like the Renaissance, you'd have a master artist, and then you have like their army of artists underneath them, and you learn from that person. And so it was like an apprenticeship. And so this internship that I had was so helpful because that person became my mentor, and he's a very successful children's book illustrator and author. And so it was like having somebody when I knew I was weaker at that business side, and I felt like I needed more, and I needed a little bit more hand holding. I mean, everybody's different. Some people don't need that, but I felt like I needed that personally. So to find a mentor and be able to trade my time and what the things that I could bring to the table to that person, it was great. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, you really have to look at the quality of your work, what market you're going to be in, or you're choosing to do, especially predicated to illustration, because portfolio, if you want it geared towards editorial, should have work that fits the editorial market, or like children's books, like you should have things in your portfolio that meets the needs of that market. And so it's kind of hitting that sweet spot where you have work that is high level, but also has marketability. And those are sometimes two different things. And it was something that I didn't, I just learned from having a mentor. I felt like it was really having that mentor that really made me aware of that. So yeah, I hope that helps give you some clarity about getting your master's degree. And like at the end of the day, do your research, really talk to people, make a pros and cons list for yourself. Also check out some online schools, because, that you may not need a degree. Like, really look at what are you trying to do and see by talking to other people, especially professionals, you're going to pick up like, oh, well, that person didn't need a degree, or that person, like to become a children's book illustrator and author, you do not need a MFA. That's not, but for me, where I was at the season of my life, I needed that push to say, I'm going to make this a regular practice. Now it's like, now I just do it like whatever I need to be doing on my own independently. And it's that really got me the jump start. So, but yeah, there's some other interviews that I'm going to put in the description box of people who they kind of talk about this topic of getting your MFA. Is it worth it? Is it not? It's always good to hear other people's perspectives and opinions about that. But I wish you all the best and success in what you want to do creatively, and to go for it. And I don't really regret getting my MFA. It worked for me, but it might not work for everybody. And and I did get my certificate bump, so that was nice. But I ended up not necessarily taking the path that I thought I would, that I originally thought I would want to teach necessarily higher ed. And who knows, it could always change. But right now, I'm really happy teaching in the lower grades. It's a really great fit for me and what I want to do as a children's book author and illustrator. So anyways, but yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to have more videos, maybe some drawing and also process videos of what I'm working on in my studio. All right, thanks for listening. Bye.